now to think about what is happening in Scotland, what's happening in Scottish schools and with young people, what are they seeing in terms of nicotine products. So I'd like to invite Andy MacGregor to come up and join. Andy's well known and to Ash Scotland through his work with ScotCen, and can tell you everything you need to know about data with young people, tobacco, nicotine in Scotland. Yeah, get yourself some water. And has been working with the University of Stirling on a kind of 360-degree project just to take the temperature of what's happening now with young people in Scotland. So I'll hand over to you, Andy.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sheila. I've got a fair bit to get through, so I will get cracking, I hope. Can you hear me at the back? Perfect. I don't normally need microphone, as my colleagues will attest. The wider study that Sheila was just mentioning there, exploring the retail availability, display and marketing of new nicotine products in Scotland. It's actually led by Alison Ford from University of Stirling, who is here today. I'll be giving it frequent name checks throughout and frequent plugs. We're actually doing a symposium at the NCD conference next week as well, where all components of the study are being presented. Today I'm going to focus on research question 3, because our work is involving schools, work in secondary schools, qualitative field work, and primarily getting the views of young people and school teaching staff. But the wider study, you'll see the 4 study communities in Scotland. Work package 1 is being led by the University of Edinburgh and Jamie Pearce. And it's a mapping of retail outlets and sales data. Work package 2, the PI, as I mentioned, is Alison Ford. She's also leading this component, the advertising marketing audit of nicotine retail outlets. And work package 3, qualitative fieldwork in 4 secondary schools, and a big shout out to the team. In fact, they're nearly all here today. Jessica Shields, Asia Hamid, Hannah Biggs, and Eleanor Holman, and it's only Leslie Burse, I note, who's not made it along, so special shout out to Leslie. And in terms of our methodology, not the overall project, but our work in the secondary schools, the qualitative fieldwork actually took place almost a year ago in March 2025. There were 4 schools. We had urban and rural small town communities, and in each of these we had a more affluent and a more deprived, which gives you 4. So we had 4 schools in each of these categories, 1 each, which gives you the total of 4. And we did 4 pupil focus groups in each of these schools, a total of 16 mini groups, so 77 pupils took part, 40 girls, 37 boys. They were actually single sex groups, and it ended up being 40 secondary 3 and 37 pupils who took part in the focus groups. We also interviewed school staff. There was 13 interviews across the 4 schools, and they tended to be senior members of the secondary school team, or those with a kind of guidance or pastoral support role. And all components are deeply immersed in stage 3 at the moment. This actually predates the field work. We did observations around the schools, and this is really to flag. It's one of the school catchment shops, and the disposable van was coming in June, and this had a typical display behind the counter, but it had this huge temporary display that was put up just behind the sweets. It was so tall that there actually is a shopkeeper behind that, and he couldn't see me taking the photo. This was the best bit about these observations. This poor person could not see behind me. This display was too big. And these are within school grounds or just the parks outside. And the pack on the left is Regel, that's counterfeit tobacco that was being used. And there was disposable vapes, as you can imagine, absolutely everywhere. That's just one example. So straight on though to the findings. So not surprisingly, potentially, the awareness of vapes in particular was very, very high, knowledge level very high, of all types, the disposables, reusables, the box mods. Pupils also very knowledgeable about brand types and nicotine strength. And staff, though, also very knowledgeable about vaping and what's happening within schools. However, pouches, nicotine pouches, quite a discrepancy noted here. There was high awareness in pupils. They talked about snus or snus or upper deckies, because obviously it goes into the upper lip. So they call them upper deckies, or they used the brand name. But school staff really lacked awareness. They didn't really have any knowledge of use within schools. Heated tobacco, Christina was just mentioning heated tobacco, and you'll have seen the displays yourselves. The pupils at the moment, anyway, or at least our pupils, were not interested. They said they were for granddads, for old people. They weren't for them. They were decidedly uncool. So at the moment, these did not seem to be ticking the right boxes, despite quite active marketing, I know, particularly in Europe when I was over recently. And staff, though, have no awareness of heated tobacco whatsoever. Tobacco was quite interesting. School staff view is that the battle has been won, really, in schools. Pupils don't use it. It's yesterday's news. It's the second front. It's vapes. It's nicotine products that are the only game in town. But as I'll come on to later, that doesn't seem to be the case. So, access to the new nicotine products, particularly vapes, many ways were reported by the pupils, particularly from older pupils and peers using social media within school, so advertising on Snapchat and Instagram, but also from family members, both knowingly and unwittingly, local shops directly and indirectly, online also. They're saying there's no issue with buying online frequently, no checks whatsoever. And a few quotes there from, I think it's a girls' focus group in S4. So I'll start with actually the middle one, just to save a little bit of time, because this talk is actually a bit tight for 15 minutes. Different websites, you just order them, or if you have pals that sell them. I have so many pals that sell them. And then it goes on, like on their Snapchat story, they'll post it, they'll make fake accounts under a fake name, they'll do something to profile picture, and then post it, I'm selling, who's wanting, and all the flavors and that. Moving on to marketing. Awareness, very high again. There's descriptions of the shops in particular, the shop displays, so behind the counter, point of sale, windows, signage outside shops. But beyond that too, to online marketing, bus ad shells. And in terms of pouches, they mentioned special stalls set up, for example, in train stations. You've probably seen these, and pouches being offered and handed out. Not necessarily always checking age or anything like that, although nicotine pouch, of course, there's no age restriction at this time. But a perception amongst the pupils and the staff that it's blatantly aimed at young people, which is perhaps not surprising. The bottom bullet there is about just some of the social media sites and the tricks that actually appeal to young people, such as doing the jellyfish. If you don't know what it is, you can look up the jellyfish. You can imagine the smoke rings and what it might be doing to create the jellyfish. So this top quote from an S3 girls group. This is all about a vape display. I think they're aesthetic. I never try them. I think they look cool. I think it's dead pretty. Oh, you're like, oh, it's colourful. And I'd say it's marketed at Wayne's. And funnily enough, we did the display study in 2013 to 17, and it was to look at the point of sale tobacco ban. And we've got identical quotes for tobacco at the same time. You know, one of the papers was, it looks like an adult sweetie shop. And it's exactly the same for vapes now. Just go forward a decade. And then it's marketed at young. There's a school staff member. You're not telling me a 42-year-old adult goes, oh, passion fruit bubble gum, that sounds lovely. These are designed as once were the toy cigarettes. It's designed to hook youngsters. So use. Obviously, this is qualitative research. This isn't prevalence study, but the pupils we spoke to, they said that current and ever use was high, particularly disposables at this point, disposable vapes. I should say, though, our sampling approach, we're actually recruiting those who are at risk of vaping or deemed at risk of vaping. So we use school staff guidance to identify known vapors or ex-vapors or those with vaping friends. So it could be that is inflating the picture a little. But prevalence was also described as being high across the school and in all school years. The staff, though, thought it might have peaked 1 to 2 years ago. They thought that might have been the kind of highest levels of vaping they had noted around the school. They thought that pupils were more discreet now. They described them as being cuter or slyer and not quite as overt in the usage. And also schools have taken quite active steps to address the issue, so they thought that might have had an impact. So they weren't entirely clear, but there was a view maybe the peak has come and there is a downturn. Location for this within schools, as you'll know, the school toilets is one of the main battlegrounds, but when we did our observations, it was areas around the school. We were around at lunchtime and the parks and woodland or whatever were all being used. You could just see the clouds develop as soon as the bells had gone. Still occasional use noted within the school itself. And this is a group of this was really looking at vaping initiation in some way. Everyone else was doing it. I tried it off a friend. How long ago was that? 3 years. Snoozer the vapes, 2 years ago. S2 was my first puff. But moving on to pouches, this was actually quite interesting, really, just because of the very different views, again, of pupils and staff. Experimental use among pupils was actually quite commonly reported. More established use was rarer and seemed to be the preserve of older male pupils, potentially related to sport. They seemed, particularly, there was those who were interested in football. We talk about footballers who used pouches. All those who used them liked the ability to use them discreetly. So they said you could use them in buses, you could use them in the classroom, and you would not be caught. Experimental use, or some quite negative impacts reported, particularly from those who kind of misjudged how powerful these things can be in delivering nicotine. So attacks of nausea, fainting, sickness, sweating, tachycardia, racing heart, all these things reported by pupils. As I say, the school staff, we mostly had to tell them what pouches actually were. Most of them didn't really have any knowledge of what a pouch was. And if you showed it to them, they said, I think some knew about the Scandinavian snus containing tobacco, but possibly not much beyond that. And so what would you call these? Snus, upper deckies. I don't vape much. I did see people talking about the snus, or whatever you call them. I tried them. I didn't like them at first. I liked them a bit more. I'm never ever doing them again. Last Tuesday I took one. I got told it was the wrong milligrams. I just threw up everywhere in the school. And then we asked about what side effects might be, and they had a perception it might lead to gum cancer. I wouldn't want gum cancer, but I'd rather have worse gums than worse lungs. And we've actually got a paper published in Addiction, and that's actually in the subject title. I'd rather have worse gums than worse lungs. So you can look that out if you're interested. And I mentioned earlier there's potentially another mismatch with tobacco. It's not as prevalent as vaping, according to the pupils, not surprisingly, but still reported. Pupils also reporting that dual use is common, particularly the vape tobacco dual use, as opposed to the pouch tobacco, for example. Cannabis came up a little bit, might be associated with tobacco too, but we didn't get a huge amount of information, and the pupils were not always as willing to go into that area in these particular focus groups we conducted. And the observations I mentioned earlier, it was clear that tobacco use is still ongoing for the amount of cigarette packs in the litter. And it does appear from our interviews that the teachers who think that it's all past and tobacco is no longer a concern among pupils and it's all NNPs and vapes, it doesn't appear to be quite the case. So this is from the top group. So this is asking about THC. Yeah, people have had them in school, they're not common. And then the next, I think everyone who I know that vapes smokes tobacco as well. And then the school staff member, I think tobacco smoking is something we barely see now. It used to be common. We had the old traditional smokers' corner, where the pupils would hide out the back. There's none of that happening now. It's been vaping. So on to impact and future developments. A considerable impact actually reported by schools. You have addicted pupils, the adverse reactions we've mentioned, such as the sickness or whities or fainting attacks. School staff are confiscating products, they're reporting to parents. There's detentions or reflection lunchtimes, exclusions of pupils. Still taking place, but now rare. That was something that happened more maybe 1 or 2 years ago. Pupils are missing classes to vape, as well as doing other things, but truancy is on the increase. Toilets are introducing card systems, there's mobile unit monitors set up outside. Staff are doing sweeps of the toilet block. In one school, they were finding vapes stored for later use by pupils in sanitary bins and in crawl spaces under the false ceiling above sinks. It's taking up a lot of staff time, this kind of monitoring that's actually going on, as well as the impact on non-vaping pupils. Those who we had in groups who are no longer vaping do not like the atmosphere in the school toilet and find it intimidating and an environment well worth avoiding. Fire alarms, again, still being set off, not as much again as 1 to 2 years ago, but that appears to be also new sensors are being used that aren't quite as sensitive, as well as the pupils now know where the sensors are, so are now avoiding those particular areas. And litter, janitorial pickup, and all these sort of things, again, impacting on school and staff time. And PSE teaching, the staff want more guidance and materials in this particular area. They feel much more confident in terms of tobacco, where they feel there's a real evidence base. But with NNPs, they feel it's emerging, and they want more information. So if challenged by pupils, they can actually give more guidance. Now, this is, in fairness, the most extreme example we got. This is a school staff member talking about a pupil. Pupil vapes every 20 minutes, really struggling to get to classes. They're nicotine vapes. She bought a 4,000 puffer. She'd finished it by Tuesday. That's extreme, and a school member of staff's working with the family. It's an unusual one, but it's so worrying. It's so bad for our mental health. And this is from a senior lead, the SLT. There's a senior leadership team in the school. From period 3 to period 7, Monday to Thursday, this is the SLT team itself, we sit there and observe. We sit in the middle of the foyer. We can observe the children coming through. We can't say no to a child wanting the toilet, so we have to monitor and be observant. And they also have the teachers looking for toilet demerits and putting those in the computer system and downloading reports. I thought this was fairly remarkable. An SLT team is sitting in a foyer outside a toilet block most of the day from a Monday to a Thursday, monitoring what's going on and who's spending more time in there. To me, that was quite remarkable. And this is I kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, the negative environment. It's a group in one cubicle. You can see it smells, it stinks. You can see it in the air. It doesn't bother me because it's quite normalized, but it's quite dirty when you actually think about it. So the ban on disposable vapes came in June, but it was obviously this research predated it in terms of the field work. The staff were supportive of it. The pupils had more mixed views. Obviously some were using them, so had some concerns about that. There was the positive view would be that it would reduce pupil use, litter, environmental impact might be better. The negative was that pupils will still access them. They might stockpile, they may shift to other types of NNP. And obviously the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, it's the House of Lords now, isn't it? I think there was a debate on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday. I'm not entirely sure what the outcome of that is, but I think hopefully it'll be looking at all these issues. So the marketing regulations and age restrictions and flavouring and packaging, all these things will hopefully be addressed in some shape or form May or June or something like that, it might come in.
Well, maybe a bit beyond.
Maybe a bit beyond, right, okay. Thanks, Sheila. So how do you feel about the ban on disposables? Not happy. It's a shame. You'll still be able to get them, though. There are people in school that sell them. They always have loads. They're stocked up. You can get them online. Just order them. Oh, it's easy. If all the vapes were gone, I feel like everyone would be on the snooze. They'd all be on the wee small box vapes like what he's got. That's another boy in the group. Yeah, like the mechanical ones. And personal and social education. Pupils basically said to us that very little is ever addressed about vaping in these classes. The staff said they did try to address it, although, as I said earlier, they find it quite difficult to do so. Tobacco, as I said, easier to address, big evidence base, and the pupils seem to accept that evidence base. Vapes, what's the evidence? What are the harms? What also are the harms of nicotine addiction more widely? And staff feeling they can't necessarily address a challenge. And staff also calling, therefore, for more guidance support materials to develop teaching in this area in the future. So I think there's been a huge input in PSE in schools, big input in the danger of smoking. They're well known in research. You can share that with young people, whereas with vapes, they're still in the early stages. We do cover it in PSE, but I mean, young people, I'm not sure they're quite believers yet because of the lack of research behind it. Being more knowledgeable about the dangers, being able to share that with young people. So that was the kind of request. And I think I've come right to the end. That's actually earlier than I thought I would. But it was just actually to flag the fact that Finger on the Pulse Ash Scotland have already updated resources. And I think it's January 2026 that those tobacco-free school and youth packs have now been updated and circulated. So hopefully that will address some of those requests from the teachers. And just to flag a little bit about the papers I'd mentioned, I'd rather have worse gums and worse lungs. That's published in Addiction online, and there's a special nicotine pouch edition coming out in Addiction, which this will be part of later in the year. And this other paper looking much more at the wider school impact bit I covered in the second half of the talk. I've got a pupil who vapes every 20 minutes. That's just been accepted by BMG Open, but we don't as yet have a publication date for that. So thank you to CSO Scotland for the grant. Thank you to Alison Ford, the PI of the project. Thank you to my research team too, and obviously all those who took part in the research. And thanks also to Ash Scotland for the work you do and for the invitation to speak today. Okay, thanks.